very much for inviting me. Thanks to Emmy and to Britt Caraway for teaching my book. And it's been really incredible. I wanted to come and see the town and the university and just be a part of it. So I'm really honored to be invited to be here. I was told to read a little bit from my novel, so I'm going to read from a chapter in the middle. This is a Bangladeshi family that is now in America. The second generation is in America, but the previous generation, so sort of tracing back who we are, the Bangladeshis who are in America, sort of made their money in the Middle East. So, Bangladesh is a developing country or a third world country, and so a huge generation of Bangladeshis went to the Middle East to various countries and made their money. So this is the father, Nasiruddin, in Iraq at a time when Iraq is breaking into war, so they have to leave. So I'm going to read from that chapter. At the bottom of the river Tigris. The dust of the desert never settles. Just as Iraq grew from a country of Bedouin nomads herding camels, donkeys, and sheep to a modern land of bounty, soon that moment was taken over also. Summer returned, and the air became hot and heavy. The sky grew thick with rumors. The Ba'ath Party became more hardlined. Dr. Saadi lost his job to a Ba'ath Party member who was many years junior to him because the government desired his appointment. Saddam Hussein declared himself absolute ruler of Iraq. My students became dark-faced and disheartened. They met secretly in street-side shops under the cover of dark to sip bitter coffee in tiny cups, discussing the revolutionaries who had been imprisoned, tortured, and hanged, and those who had fled to other Arab countries or Europe. They whispered to me that people on the left were being disappeared daily, including some decent people inside the party. Then things took a turn for the worse. The Shatt al-Arab was in dispute. Shockingly, trouble started with Iran, at first merely as exchanged insults and satirical cartoons of the Iranian leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, dancing madly on TV. I asked the students, what is the conflict? They said that the Iranian leader had instigated Shia rebellion against Saddam Hussein, and there was dispute over territories. The fervor kept mounting, and in September, before our shocked eyes, a war started with Washington supporting Saddam Hussein and Libya, Syria, and Israel supporting Khomeini. The country where we had been living in peace for so many years changed before our eyes. Food became scarce, many items were rationed. Rahila stood in long lines to collect whatever food was being given out on ration. As petrol became scarce, the government ruled that cars with even-numbered license plates were allowed on the road on one day, while cars with odd-numbered license plates were allowed to drive on the alternate day. The markets thickened with the Popular Army, formed by civilian volunteers signing up to fight against Iran. Don't you think this war is a mistake? I asked the Iraqi students. Even if Iraq defeats Iran, what will come of it? Both countries will be strained by the cost of fighting a war. Don't worry, the students assured me with big smiles. The war will be over in a few days. The male students, young men with bright eyes and tufted dark hair, started joining the army and going off to war. In a photograph taken with me before the war, they're standing tall with their chests out, stylish, holding cigarettes at an upward angle in their hands, modern and intellectual. We moved to a flat in Babulta in the city, close to the children's school, public transportation, and the markets. The children were cramped for space in this flat, caught in the anxiety of the grown-ups. Rahel and I decided that we had to leave. 8 years had passed since we had arrived in Iraq. Several coups had taken place in Bangladesh in the interim years. The Prime Minister Sheikh Mujib had been assassinated, followed by several unstable years and multiple changes of government. Recently, President Zia, the latest in a long line of leaders, had also been assassinated. Rahila and I tried to make plans while we ate dinner. Lenin kept interrupting us. Abba, Amma, there is nothing to be afraid of in war. We shall die when God wishes us to. Rahila was irritated by the interruptions. Realizing that the children were vying for attention, I told them to watch the Polish cartoons on TV in the drawing room. After they left, a high-pitched siren sounded outside. The drawing room was next to the front street with windows facing the street. Lenin started to scream at the top of his lungs. Rahel and I rushed to the drawing room and picked up the children, dragging them away from the open windows. For the next few hours, we hid in the inner corridor of the building till the air raid siren subsided. After that day, we began to prepare to leave. Bina had dreams in which we almost reached Bangladesh, but could not. Bangladesh was like a dreamland to my children, so fantastic that they couldn't believe we could actually go there. My youngest son, Kazi, pestered me with questions about the mechanics of traveling home. Abba, is Bangladesh in the sky? Why do you say that? Because Bangladeshis come here from the sky, and they fly off into the sky. I smiled at my son's conviction, feeling satisfied that we would get home in no time. Once again, Rahila stood in line at department stores. This time, we bought luxury items to carry home. Trousers that arrived in cartons from China, dinnerware, gold jewelry, Georgette saris, and showpiece Iraqi dolls dressed in traditional clothes. I bought a maroon brocade material and foam to make a sofa. We piled everything into our suitcases, determined to leave nothing behind. But our travel plans soon became complicated. When the first bombs fell on Mosul, the airport in Mosul shut down. Baghdad airport was also closed. The only way to leave the country was to take a bus to Kuwait and board a PIA flight from there. Most of my foreign colleagues had already left or were scrambling to get out. The Americans and Europeans had fled the country long ago, rescued by their foreign missions. Only the unfortunate citizens of the Indian subcontinent remained. One day, I went to collect my 3 children from school. Loud ululations could be heard in the house next to the school. The son of the house, a young man who had served as a pilot in the war, had been killed when his plane had been shot down. Now hundreds of family members gathered at the house as the dead body was carried in. From the road, I could see the fallen soldiers' families sobbing uncontrollably. I took my 3 children out of the school and began walking toward the parked car. Air raid sirens began to sound above our heads. All around us, parents and school children jumped out of their cars and ducked low on the road. In a few seconds, planes swooped over our heads, accompanied by the loud cracking of anti-aircraft guns from the ground. My children covered their eyes and ears with their hands, crouching on the ground. Then I thought I heard the sound of a bomb falling. The explosion was louder than anything that could be imagined. Quick, before the planes could come back, my children and I flew to the safety of a neighboring house. An elderly couple with lined faces opened their door and ushered us in, leading us to an inner courtyard that was open to the sky. They fed us water and date cookies and calmed the shaking children. Speaking in a mixture of Arabic and broken English, they told us that their 3 sons had gone off to fight in the war against Iran. They had no idea about their sons' whereabouts. Later, I learned that a military base had been bombed that day. A few days later, we faced a big setback. The teenage boy who came to exchange our empty gas cylinders ran away with them. The cylinders were rationed by the government. Each family was awarded 2 gas cylinders. It was not possible to simply walk into a market and buy another one. Without a gas cylinder, we could not cook. Seeing no other alternative, I lodged a complaint with the police. The next day, 2 mustachioed policemen brought back the cylinders and the young man who had taken them, holding him between them. "Is he the one who stole your gas?" one of the police officers asked me in English. I peered into the boy's face and recognized him immediately. He had a mischievous, youthful face with red cheeks and curly hair, and dark blue eyes the shade of the water of the Tigris. "Can you ask him why he stole the cylinders?" I asked the officers. One of the officers spoke rapidly with the boy, who answered in a shaking voice. The officer turned to me. "He says he's going to sell them. His family is poor. He has 5 younger brothers and sisters to feed." I pleaded with the police to let the boy go, but the policeman said that this was impossible. I had to come down to the station with them and promise in writing that I was withdrawing my complaint. I drove to the police station and asked them to drop the charges. After many formalities, the young man was released. Before I left the station, I had to promise the police never to complain again if I was only going to withdraw my accusation. Dr. Saadi, that's his boss, asked me to come to his house to discuss a personal matter. We sat in his living room, paneled with rich wood and filled with bookshelves and fine cushions. Dr. Saadi served me bitter coffee in a delicate cup without handles and broached the subject for which he had summoned me. His younger brother, a pilot, had gone missing in action in the war.
Dr. Saadi's family did not know if his brother's plane had been shot down, if he was still alive or dead, or if he was a prisoner of war in Iran. Dr. Saadi wanted me to try and find out about his brother's whereabouts from outside Iraq by writing to the foreign missions. When will this war end, I asked, feeling bad that I was escaping unheard while leaving my Iraqi colleagues and neighbors behind. Dr. Saadi informed me that there were some people in the government desperately trying for a ceasefire with Iran. You said earlier one time that so many people on the left have left the country. Will you not leave? I asked. Dr. Saadi laughed with a sad smile and ran his fingers through his thick hair. This is my land, Dr. Nasir. No matter what happens, I have given up my politics and my dreams. I am contented to be able to kiss the soil of my country. He shifted his position on the sofa. The world will never allow there to be peace in Iraq because this land is too important to the region. The Iraqi people will never be left alone to determine their dreams without interference from the international powers. I nodded sadly, but no matter. Remember the history of Iraq, as I told you? The city of Babylon has existed for 4,000 years. We had Assyrian kings, Abbasid caliphs, and Ottoman rule. Then the British came. But the Iraqis rose against the monarchy. In every period, the people fought for their freedom, no matter how grim their situation became, and no matter what jackals betrayed them. Our spirits will live on, no matter what happens in the future. It is the same way in my homeland, I said excitedly. When the people of Bangladesh were being massacred by the Pakistani state, Bangladesh was simply a calculation in the Cold War game of the international community. It seems that the ordinary people everywhere struggle for better lives, but the politicians and international bodies see them only as pawns. In May, I took my family to Baghdad to buy new airplane tickets for our passage out of Iraq. I was successful in buying the tickets on the first day on a flight leaving in June from Kuwait airport. We were staying with some Bangladeshi friends in the city. That evening to celebrate, we drove to a park in Baghdad, parking the cars beside a small pond. We enjoyed a small picnic sitting on a Syrian mat, laying out cucumber sandwiches, roast chicken, shish kebab, and pickles, reminiscing about home and looking forward to leaving. My 3 children ran freely among the swings and slides. Still, a war was going on and we did not want to risk an air raid, so we piled into our cars before dark, preparing to leave. Another car rammed the Pujo from behind. I swore and got out of the car to examine the damage. The Pujo's body was dented badly. The children were in the back seat. After checking that they were all right, I left my family and drove off in our friend's car, chasing the other car, which had backed up and sped off. I was determined not to let the culprit get away. We flagged down the car about 1 kilometer from the park and forced the driver to go to the police station with us. To my surprise, the driver was drunk and contrite. The police asked me for an estimated cost of the damages in dinar. I named a sum. The police obliged the other driver to pay me the full sum. When I returned to the park in my friend's car, Rahila was screaming. Our youngest child, Kazi, had died of an internal hemorrhage. He looked spotless on the outside. I started to hit my head against the car's body, screaming soundlessly. Rahila and I buried our youngest child, Kazi, in Mosul. I lifted the surprisingly light box containing my son's body and descended into the dirt hole. I howled like a child and had to be carried away by my friends. I thought that my son had been swallowed by the Tigris River to rest in peace at its bottom forever, frozen in time. A month later, we finally started our journey to Bangladesh with heavy suitcases and boxes tied with rope. From Mosul, we rode a bus to Baghdad, where we boarded another bus to carry us to the Iraqi border with Kuwait. In Baghdad, we were surprised to find beggars banging their alms cups against the windows of the bus. Our fellow travelers were mostly South Asians, laborers from India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, with big eyes and frightened expressions. In disjointed voices, they told us about their harrowing journeys out of the different parts of the country. In the evening, the Iraqi bus reached the border with Kuwait and dropped us in the middle of nowhere. That night, we slept in an open field under the Iraqi sky. The next morning, we rose with the sun and hauled our luggage to the Kuwaiti checkpoint. After the Kuwaiti officials verified our papers, we boarded another bus that carried us to the Kuwaiti airport. Finally, after several days of travel, we were on a plane to Bangladesh.
So my writing process is just waiting till everyone's gone. Like I like to have the house to myself. So I wrote this, I think when I wrote this, I was like a young mother, like I had a baby and I had my in-laws and we were living in this tiny apartment and with like, you know, those sliding doors for walls. So I would really just stay up till late and write it, but it wasn't like a problem writing it because that's all I wanted to do. Like it just flowed out of me, like I wrote it in a very short amount of time. But part of the writing process is also revision, and I feel like revision is a completely, like it's another, like it occupies a different part of your brain, and that feels like a different part of the writing process. So when I was editing this book, I would just like do it as a job. Like I have to get it done and I have to do it. And so I would come home from work and I would sleep and, you know, take a nap or get my brain fresh. And every day work on it. Yeah, like I mean, even if I was sleeping, I knew that I was going to work on it. Like whatever I did, I knew that I had to come back and work on it. It was a very different. Yeah, I think my publicist pointed out to me, but nothing came off it. Like no one was interested. I mean, not just my novel, but I don't think I saw any like articles or anything saying, hey, this is like the 20-year anniversary of the Iraq War. So I thought it was going to be like a big deal, and it wasn't. And then there've been, I guess this is related to it, like there've been lots of stories about the Iraq War. Like if you watch American television, like even like anything, like I'll be watching a series and then one episode, like they're referring to the Iraq War, like veterans, right? Like Friday Night Lights, I think one of the boys' father, like just like marginally even, was a veteran. I was watching like something like Cabinet of Curiosities, and there's one episode where there's this horrible guy who probably had fought in the war, but was like, had like I forget what, like maybe like worshipped witchcraft or whatever, but there was like the bush in the background and Iraq going on. So it's there in the American imagination, but it's never there to say like what happened to Iraqis during the Iraq War. And I'm not Iraqi and I cannot tell that story, but it's just very interesting to see that it's everywhere in the American imagination, but it's only there in terms of one narrative. So in 2003, you know, the Iraq War started, and that was also when I was well, actually, then I was in the MFA program, so I was in the creative writing program, and I think soon after I started writing this novel in I think Chitra Banerjee Divakarun's class, and it's so hard to remember like how you pictured a story, like how it came to you, but I do remember some things. Like one was definitely that it was going to be about the Iraq War, that a character would come in and see everyone partying in America and be like, well, there's a war going on, and she would try to tell people, but it wouldn't make sense to anyone because it would be so far away, and they would just look at her with blank eyes. So that was always in my mind. And the rest is definitely, I think, in general in my fiction, but also in this novel, I like to take things that I know. So it's not autobiographical, but I like to take, like I've lived in Iraq, so I like to take that. I've lived in Bangladesh, so I like to take that, and I like to write about very familiar spaces. So in that way, and then also like the old stories of Bangladesh are like, I think this is particular to Bangladesh, but in our imagination, we've grown up being told about the war, right? Like 1971, 1971. And so those stories are also in our imagination. And so, yeah, it's almost like a story of the self. Like if you're a Bangladeshi, what is the story of yourself? And so that's what the novel is. that makes sense. Like tracing the story. I had written it, I'm trying to think of examples. I think like Wuthering Heights does this, and I think Ethan Frome does it. I think there must be a lot of
to read that book, actually.
Oh,
I
really?
randomly grabbed it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
so-
I don't know, it's crazy that you said that, yeah.
So this is what I wanted to write. I wanted to write like a novel. I mean, that's how I started it, where someone comes in and then they tell the story. So it was like the character Bina would go to a party and be like, hey, what's up? Why are you all this way? Like, what's going on? But then she would question herself, like, why am I in this state? Because she lived in America for many years, but she didn't have a green card or a visa, and she was going to go. And so she was like, well, my parents are poor, I'm poor, we're all doing really badly, we're all struggling, what's going on? And so she sort of accuses her parents, she's mad at them, she's mad at herself, but she's also mad at these Bangladeshis who are really like, they have 2-story houses, they have 3-car garages, and they have great cars, and a world that's fantastic to them. And then she would just start telling, she would just start asking her father, and then just start telling the story. But when I was workshopping it, and I worked on it for many years, but always surrounded by writers, and then with agents, and then with my publisher, like it was always like, no, we want the dual narrative. We want both characters, I think that was inescapable. Like, I think it was. I mean, I don't know if it was right or not. I think it was right if everyone keeps saying it, but they wanted an American story. Like everyone wanted an American story, and like, oh, the father's gone. Like that's old. Like tell us the daughter's story. So I had to invent a story in America, and I had to make it regular, the dual narrative, which was really, really. I mean, I think the reason it was 20 years was like it was just impossible. Like I couldn't get my head around it, and like I couldn't imagine it. Just couldn't. That was really hard. I think like in terms of craft, I would say I would never do that again. Like impose. Not that this structure is wrong, but I would never impose a structure on an already existing story. That is crazy. So Bina's the main character whom we sort of like, but her friend Salma's supposed to be a character we don't like, or I didn't like, and it was really hard for me to write her. And then I started writing from her point of view, and so I didn't know her I guess the backstory's in the story, like how did she know her, and I wanted her to be a childhood friend, because even if your childhood friend isn't like a very savory character, it's still your childhood friend, and they love you, and they're very affectionate, and I wanted that. And she would say things like, oh, I used to know your mom, and like say nice things that would make you feel good. But it was wonderful, like writing from her point of view. So for example, I think in one of the scenes I had like she's going to see her friend, and she says, oh, like the war is starting, and I want to check the gas prices at the pump, and oh my God, the gas prices are going up, that's good, that means my job is safe. And I loved writing her that way because I was in her mind rather than judging her. So yeah, I think I discovered backstory. So I didn't invent the backstory, I discovered backstory by sort of writing in her point of view. And then I think my editor was like, you can't do that, you're like writing all kinds of points of view, and you're, like bring it down to one at least per chapter. So I took it out, but I love being in her head. I hope that answers the question. I mean, I got the backstory by being in her head.
Yeah, so you kind of like write in their point of view to create their...
Or accidentally get to it. I don't think, I mean, other people do that, but I don't think I could be that writer who like creates a backstory and then imposes it. Usually I'm writing, like, so-and-so walked into a room and he was really tired, and then I'm like, where does he work? And and then I'll just make it up then. And then I'll be like, whoa, if he works there, then he must have this with him, and it's just coming out. And then suddenly, as soon as I put a detail there, I'm like, oh, that's why he has the rabbit, right? Like, it's connecting to something else that I put there. Like, even when I was reading now, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I read the foreign mission that, you know, all the people, all the rich countries had taken their people out through their foreign missions. And then later, when the Iraqi guy's brother is missing, he has no option but to go to foreign missions and ask them to ask. So you can see the power imbalance, that if you're an American, your life is so much more valuable